Hi guys, hi, how's it going? How y'all doing today? Hopefully today finds you well. Today I am doing my top 10 palettes for spring, and it's really just about palettes that I think are calling my name for spring and palettes that I want to get some use out of this spring. So hopefully in my next, not my upcoming No Pan Left Behind, but in my next update to No Pan Left Behind, you guys will see these palettes as having been used. That update would come in July to go over the palettes that I used in April, May, and June. And I'm hoping that these palettes are palettes that I pull for. And I have some new bins in my closet back here. I'm just going to put these palettes into those bins so that I remember to use them, because while I'm doing my makeup, those closet doors are open most of the time. So that said, if that sounds like something you're interested in, please keep on watching. For those of you new here, hi, my name is Donna, lover of all things high and colorful beauty and self-care. Ultimately, this is my self-care. I love coming to you, talking to you about the good, the bad, the ugly, all the things coming into my collection, leaving my collection. And this year is a no-buy year, so it's mostly about the things that are in my collection. So it's not going to be about the newest, brightest thing, and if that is what you're looking for, it's totally okay. This might not be the channel for you, but I'd love it if you stuck around. And if you do find that this channel is interesting, I'm interesting, something about it draws your attention, I implore you, please subscribe to my channel. I'm trying to hit 2K. I've been trying to hit 2K for years. I'm so much closer than I ever thought I was going to be honest. But every day it seems like we have new people here, and if you're one of them, welcome. I'm so happy that you're here. All the good YouTube-y stuff aside, let's jump into this because I'm excited to talk to you about the palettes that I have that I'm going to be pulling for this spring. Okay, we're going to start by saying I don't look at my makeup collection in terms of seasons, but there are some like color stories that when you open them up, you are just inclined to think of them in terms of a season. Like this is definitely a fall toned color story. This is definitely a winter toned color story. And you guys just saw me put together a palette in my Build Your Own palette. I think that was Wednesday's video that went up. It's got some idea of the colors that I really think about in terms of spring, but they're really more of that like bright but also kind of pastel in nature thought process in terms of color stories for spring. Maybe some like sagey greens or some like corals instead of like bright oranges, things like that. So I did pull some palettes from my collection that I think remind me of spring the most, and I wanted to showcase them for you today. I also want to, I changed my hair, obviously, again, and I really dig the length. I love the length, actually. I'm always behind the times. I feel like I'm always behind the times as it pertains to like seasonal hair. This is definitely not summer season or spring summer season hair, but this is, I'm trying to go back to quasi-normal hair color, and this is about as quasi-normal as it's gonna get. I still think that it's very vibrant and very me. I really actually quite love it, but let's jump into this because we've said all the things. So I have some small palettes and some big palettes, so I'm just gonna go through them as they're sitting on my little stack here. The first one I pulled for this spring season is the Natasha Denona Mini Retro palette. Now, I love this palette. I love this palette so much more than I love the Retro Glam palette by Natasha Denona, and while I do feel like that is also a palette that is a spring color story, I have a different one pulled that's a very similar color story that I like more from a different brand. This is just such a beautiful palette for springtime. It's got this beautiful sagey green. It's got this really beautiful like peachy color and this like peachy pinky with a gold like overlay color as well. I love this shimmer like sagey green. It's just such a beautiful one and done color story. I think it's going to be a beautiful eye look for the springtime. So I did pull this out. Along those same lines, I pulled out this, which is the Sultry Muse by Viseart. This reminds me so much of like a bridal palette, but this is all shimmer, or all satin, I should say, because that's what I really think Viseart's shimmers remind me more of, is satins. I do think that this is a beautiful palette, and I do have some like all matte palettes in here that I think that this will definitely partner well with. They're just subdued, beautiful shimmers, not that beautiful satins, not that they're not impactful, because I do believe that they are super impactful shadows, but they truly do speak, in my humble opinion, to spring more than any other season of the year, or bridal makeup, which happens a lot in the summer, but this really does look to me like an Easter egg, which reminds me of spring. So I am pulling that palette in here as well. This is one of the palettes that I talked about being an all matte palette, and that is the Sugarpill FunSize palette. I love this palette. I love this palette so much, and it is that perfect mix of pastel that you typically think of in the springtime and vibrancy that you typically think of in maybe summer, and a little bit more sunshiny and all the things. I do think that this is a really beautiful springtime color story. I'm gonna get a lot of great looks out of this, and I don't mind pulling an all matte look out of this, but I think that it is also a palette that will partner well with these satins from the Viseart palette. So bringing in that guy there. I also have this one, which is the Morphe Petal Passion, or 9P palette. This is not a palette that I ever anticipated I would love as much as I do, because it is a Morphe palette and I'm not a Morphe stan, but this is a palette I did get in gratis, I think last year. It's got two shadows in here that are beautiful, kind of like super shocky texture to them, and then a couple of regular shimmers and 4 really truly beautiful mattes. And when I think of spring, I often think of those like almost muted pinks and corals, and this really epitomizes those, in my humble opinion. The next one I'm bringing in is almost entirely matte, which is another reason why I think, you know, I thought to bring in this palette, because I have the Natasha Denona Triochrome palette, which only has 3 metallics. The 3 shades right down the center are the metallics. But other than that, it is definitely a palette that could use a little more umphiness, a little bit more of these satiny shimmers, and is just a truly beautiful palette for the springtime. I did a look using this whole row not that long ago. I think it was late last year, honestly, for something. I can't remember what it was for, but it reminded me how much I love this palette. I love the tones of the shades in this palette, and it was totally off topic, I guess you might say, for what Natasha typically pushes out. She has the pastel palette, she has the retro glam palette, which really suit this season as well, but they're not my favorites, to be honest. So speaking of the retro glam, instead of retro glam, I am pulling in my Sydney Grace in Mels Memory palette. This is just a bunch of singles, really, that they threw into a bundle for Mel Thompson, in Mel Thompson's memory, and it was the palette that she put together that she thought that the retro palette should have been when the original retro palette came out, because it resembled absolutely nothing to do with this palette, which is the mini retro, and this one looks very similar to this palette. So I thought that this would be a great palette to pull in. It's got some really beautiful sagey greens, some really beautiful like taupes and browns. It's got, you know, some like antique golden, even some like olives in it, and I really did enjoy working with this palette a lot more than I enjoyed working with the retro glam from Natasha that is the same color story. So definitely pulling in that guy. I am also going to be pulling in Sydney Grace Tiny Marvels. This is the palette that she did in collaboration with Sydney Grace called Tiny Marvels, and it is such a springtime color story if I've ever seen one. This lavender, this like minty green, even this kind of like beautiful but also pastel-y burgundy is super, super pretty. It's got some really beautiful shimmers in it, and it is the Sydney Grace formula that is just so well loved and so phenomenal. But it does have also some pops of color that I don't think I'm gonna get out of the rest of the palettes that I pulled in for my springtime roundup. Now, you can't have springtime without having a real pastel palette, right? So I did pull in Garden of Juvia's by Juvia's Place because this is real-time pastels, and it's actually a pastel palette that I didn't mind working with, and I really love the shimmers in this palette. They're not like normal, like old school Juvia's Place shimmers in that they're not quite as heavy and thick as those shimmers, but that also means they're not quite as opaque. They're really quite beautiful actually when you layer them on, but you have to be very careful or they do kind of tend to look a little bit crispy and chunky on your eyes. But it is a beautiful palette. It's got some really beautiful shimmers in here, and while I'm not 100% sold on the mattes that are in here, I think the mattes that are in here are going to perfectly complement some of the other palettes mattes that I have rolled in, and it is a pastel palette, and you cannot do spring without a pastel Easter eggy palette. Another one that I am pulling in that kind of leans on the pastel side is my Carli Bybel one. Now, I don't 100% think that this is a pastel palette, but it does have a lot more pastel-y colors in it than I would say many of my other palettes do. Even this like red here is more of like a milky red, which translates on the eye to kind of more of a pastel-y red color. And the shimmers in here are just stunning. These two shimmers are probably two of my favorite shimmers in my entire collection, which is why I can't let go of this palette. But I really do love this palette for springtime, and I was trying to think of bringing in palettes for spring that I haven't put into a springtime video before. I know that some of these have been in a springtime video before, but palettes that I haven't really brought into a springtime palette collection video before, but also palettes that I haven't used in so dang long that I want to get some use out of. And last but not least is my pop of brilliance, my pop of jewel tones that I also think about all year long. Let's be honest, I love a jewel tone shadow, but I'm gonna bring in Blend Bunny Lure. I do think that these two rows here perfectly complement spring, and with the shimmers that go with it, or the shimmers that are in this, or the shimmers that are in the Garden of Juvia's palette, I do think that I can pull off, I mean, even just this whole palette as a whole, I think I can pull off a really beautiful saturated but also desaturated springtime look from this palette, and it's one of my favorite palettes in my collection. So there were some palettes that I thought about too, like Onzai Flora Story. I thought about that one. That one would have been good to pull in because it's got those sage greens and those lilacs. But that's a palette that I've gotten a lot of use out of over the last year because I love that palette. It was my favorite for 2023, I think. There's also, like, there's just so many palettes that I have in my collection that I think could really fit into this bubble of springtime eyeshadow palettes. But these are palettes that I haven't used in so long that really remind me of spring that I want to get some use out of because I haven't used them in forever and they deserve to be used. So that said, I know that all of my friends out here on this platform are also publishing their springtime eyeshadow palette videos, so I'll have some of them linked down below. Please go send them love. They are all just so fantastic, and I hope that you enjoyed my video as well. Let me know down in the comments section what your favorite palettes for spring are. I would surely be interested in hearing what you're pulling for spring. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what I'm going to be pulling for spring. And with that said, thank you guys so much for joining me today. I hope that you and yours are well. I hope that you are all safe and healthy and getting along as best that you can. I hope that you are all loving each other, being kind humans, and living your best life. And until next time, bye friends.